The hospital on Virella Prime never slept, not even during the silver nights when the twin moons rose over the alien skyline. Machines hummed softly in the long glass corridors. Lights glowed blue and white, and robots rolled silently across the marble floors. But deep in the lower maintenance level, far from the shining wards, a lone human pushed a mop along the hall. His name was Mark. He was just a janitor, one of the few humans allowed to work on this alien world. His pay was small, his job simple, but he liked quiet nights. No one looked at him, no one ordered him around. He could hum old Earth songs and pretend the stars outside still remembered his home. That night, as he mopped near the children's rehabilitation wing, he heard something. A soft, broken sound, a cry. He froze, the mop dripping water on the floor. The sound came again, a weak, trembling sob. Mark looked down the hall toward the therapy room. The door was half open, light flickering. He hesitated. The sign said restricted access, medical staff only. But the cry turned into a painful whimper, and something inside him couldn't ignore it. He pushed the door open. Inside the room sat a small alien child, gray skin, fragile limbs, large blue eyes wet with tears. His wheelchair had stopped halfway up a small ramp. A metal arm joint on the chair had snapped. The boy's legs, thin and mechanical, hung uselessly. A broken care robot lay in the corner, lights dead. Mark stepped closer, slowly. "Hey, buddy," he whispered, keeping his voice calm. "You okay?" The child looked up, startled. He tried to move, but the wheels stuck tight. "It hurts," he said softly, his voice trembling like a wind chime. "I can't move." Mark put down his mop and crouched beside the chair. He checked the frame, found the jammed joint, and with his rough human hands pulled the bent piece free. The chair clicked, lights blinking back on. "There we go," Mark said, smiling a little. "Better?" The boy blinked. "You fixed it." "Just a loose pin," Mark said. "You'll be fine." The child's breathing slowed. Tears still glistened on his cheeks. Mark took a small cloth from his pocket and gently wiped them away. "Hey, don't cry. Brave boys don't cry at night, right?" The alien boy sniffled. "You're not a nurse." Mark laughed softly. "No, I clean floors, not patients." "Then, why help me?" the boy asked, tilting his head. Mark paused. Why? He didn't know. Maybe because he remembered when his little sister was sick, long before humans were scattered among the stars. He smiled faintly. "Because you needed help. That's all." The boy's lips trembled, then he whispered, "Thank you." Mark nodded. "You're welcome, kid. What's your name?" "Kieran," he said softly. "My mother says I'm special." "Special, huh?" Mark chuckled. "Well, every kid's special. Even ones with cool robot legs." Kieran giggled weakly, the sound light but real. Mark fixed the chair properly, tested the brakes, and made sure the broken robot was off so it wouldn't hurt him again. He placed a small blanket over Kieran's shoulders. "You'll be okay till morning. Someone will come soon." As he turned to leave, Kieran said quietly, "Will you come again?" Mark hesitated at the door. "Maybe if they let me." Kieran smiled. "I like you, human." Mark gave a small wave and stepped into the hall, not knowing that in the far corner of the ceiling, a small lens blinked red. The hospital's security system had been recording everything: the broken robot, the janitor, the child's tears, the quiet act of kindness. And miles away, high above the city in a sky tower penthouse, that footage was being sent to a private console. The name on the console read, Alyara Ven, owner of Ventech Corporation, the most powerful and wealthy alien on Virella Prime. She was the mother of the boy. The screen flickered to life, showing the human kneeling beside her son, fixing the chair, wiping his tears, smiling with gentle patience. Alyara leaned forward, her violet eyes narrowing. No one had ever touched her son with such care, not even her best medical staff. She watched in silence as the janitor said goodbye and disappeared into the dark hallway. Then she replayed the footage again, and again. Each time something strange grew in her chest. A feeling she hadn't felt in years, something close to warmth or maybe shame. She whispered to herself, "Who are you, human?" In the quiet night, Mark returned to his cleaning route, unaware that his small act of kindness had just reached the most powerful woman on the planet. And that by morning his life and the fate of an entire empire would never be the same again. Alyara Ven rarely woke before sunrise, but that morning, Sleep had refused to come. The image of the human janitor kept replaying in her mind. The way he bent down, the gentle way he fixed the chair, the warmth in his voice when he spoke to her son. She tried to shake it off, but something inside her chest ached in a way she couldn't explain. Her entire life had been made of power. She controlled Ventec Industries, owned entire city blocks, and her signature could turn planets rich or poor overnight. Yet even with all that, she couldn't heal her son. Kieran had been born with a rare nerve condition. His body was fragile. His legs had needed mechanical support since birth, and no treatment had worked. Doctors from across the galaxy came and failed. Machines did their best, but nothing reached the boy's lonely heart. Until last night, when a janitor with rough human hands wiped his tears. Alyara's tall assistant, Virella, stepped into the room. "Madam, your schedule is—" "Cancel it," she said coldly. "All of it," Virella blinked. "But the board meeting—" "Cancel everything," she repeated. "I'm going to the hospital." Within an hour, her hovercar cut through the pale blue dawn. Below, the city shimmered. Layers of light, floating markets, transport lanes filled with ships. The wealthy lived in towers that pierced the clouds, while humans worked in the shadows below them. Alyara looked out the window, her mind spinning. She had never spoken to a human before. To her kind, humans were laborers, cheap, quiet, replaceable. Yet that janitor had done something none of her high-class doctors could do. He made her son laugh. The hospital guards almost fainted when her personal craft landed on the emergency deck. Within minutes, everyone was standing straight, nervous eyes darting as Alyara stepped inside. Her golden robe shimmered with light, and even the air around her seemed to hum. "Where is the human janitor from last night?" she asked sharply. The supervisor swallowed. "Madam, there are several humans on night shift." "Could you specify—" "The one who entered my son's therapy room," she interrupted. "Bring him." 5 minutes later, a man in a faded gray uniform appeared, holding his mop awkwardly. His hair was messy, his boots wet, his face tired but calm. Mark didn't know who she was yet, just that someone powerful wanted to see him. Alyara studied him. He wasn't tall, not particularly strong, not trained in anything she respected, yet the way he stood there, not trembling, not avoiding her eyes, then surprised her. Humans usually bowed. He didn't. "You entered a restricted medical room last night," she said coolly. "Do you deny it?" Mark nodded once. "No, ma'am." The boy was crying. "I helped him." "You realize you broke several rules," she continued, walking around him slowly. "Humans are not allowed near patients without clearance. Why risk your job?" Mark looked confused. "Because he needed help. I didn't think about rules, I just helped him." Alyara's eyes narrowed. "You expect me to believe that you, a human, risked punishment just out of kindness?" He shrugged slightly. "Maybe I'm old-fashioned. Where I come from, when someone's crying, you don't walk away." Something in his voice, quiet but certain, made her pause. No fear, no flattery, just truth. Her son's small voice broke the silence. "Mother!" Kieran's hover chair rolled in from the corridor, escorted by 2 caretakers. His face lit up when he saw Mark. "You came," he said cheerfully. Mark smiled softly. "Morning, buddy. Feeling better?" Alyara looked between them, the human and her son both smiling like old friends. Kieran tugged her sleeve. "Mom, can he come again?" "He fixed my chair. He told me stories." Alyara's throat tightened. She hadn't seen her son this happy in years. Mark quickly lowered his eyes. "Ma'am, I'll leave if I've caused trouble." I didn't mean to break rules, but Alyara didn't answer. She kept watching the two of them, her fragile son, and this strange human who acted without fear or greed. Something stirred deep inside her, a feeling she didn't want to name. When she finally spoke, her voice was softer. "You will not be punished, Mark. Return to your duties." He nodded, unsure, and left quietly down the hall. Virella leaned close, whispering, "Madam, this is improper." "A human worker." "Enough," she said sharply. "That human has done more for my child than any of your perfect machines." As she left the hospital, her reflection in the glass doors looked different. Less like a ruler, more like a mother. That night, she rewatched the footage one more time. Every frame of that human's small act of kindness replayed like a melody she couldn't stop hearing. She whispered to herself, "Maybe it's not power that changes worlds. Maybe it's people." And with that thought, Alyara made a decision that would soon shake her entire empire. starting with one human janitor who refused to walk away. For the next few days, Mark returned to his usual cleaning duties, trying to forget about the strange meeting. He assumed that was the end of it. People like her, the rich and powerful, didn't remember people like him. Still, part of him kept thinking about the little boy with the mechanical legs and the way he had smiled. That memory stayed warm inside his chest, even when the night shifts grew long and lonely. Meanwhile, high above the city, Alyara Ven sat in her glass office, staring out over the endless lights of Virella Prime. She should have been thinking about her company, her shareholders, her empire, but her mind kept circling back to the human janitor. She had watched the hospital footage again that morning. Something about his simplicity haunted her. Her son Kieran had been different ever since that night. He spoke more. He laughed more. He even tried to roll his hover chair down the hallway on his own. Every time Alyara asked him what changed, he only said one thing: "The human helped me." Alyara had spent fortunes on doctors, therapists, robotic caretakers, and nothing had worked. Yet a janitor's kindness had done what science and wealth could not. That afternoon, she made a call. "Transfer the human janitor from hospital maintenance to private service under my household staff," she ordered. Her assistant Virel nearly dropped his datapad. "Ma'am, you're hiring a human for your home? The press will—" "I don't care," she interrupted. "Make it happen quietly." Within a day, Mark was summoned to the upper district. The guards searched him twice before allowing him into the enormous tower that touched the clouds. The elevator ride felt endless, and when the doors opened, he stepped into a hallway made of shining white stone and floating light panels. He was led into a room filled with strange art, soft music, and an enormous window that overlooked the city. Then he saw her, Alyara, standing beside her son's hover chair. Mark froze. "Ma'am, did I do something wrong?" Alyara shook her head. "You did something right." She motioned toward the boy. "Kieran hasn't stopped talking about you. He wants you here as his companion." "Companion?" Mark blinked. "I'm just a cleaner, ma'am." "You're more than that," she said quietly. "You made him smile." Kieran waved excitedly. "Mark, look, I can move my chair better now." Mark grinned. "That's great, kid." Alyara folded her hands behind her back, trying to hide the faint warmth in her voice. "Your duty is simple. Spend time with him. Keep him happy. His health improves when he's emotionally stable." Mark hesitated. "Are you sure about this? People won't like a human working this close." Alyara's voice turned cold. "Let them talk. I don't take orders from gossip." And just like that, the janitor became the caretaker of a billionaire's child. At first, he didn't know what to do. The mansion was full of alien servants who stared at him like he was dirt. But Kieran didn't care. He showed Mark his room filled with toys, floating orbs, and drawing tablets. Mark found a box of old mechanical parts and decided to teach Kieran how to build a small toy. "It's called a car," he explained, showing him how wheels worked. Kieran laughed every time it moved. "You make boring things fun." Mark smiled. Maybe because boring things just need a little heart. Days turned into weeks. Kieran grew stronger. His hand stopped shaking. He learned to use his legs controls without fear. Mark helped him every day, never impatient, never harsh. Sometimes Alyara watched them from the doorway without saying a word. She saw her son laughing, drawing, learning, something she thought he had lost forever. Each time she saw Mark, something inside her shifted. The man didn't seek reward or praise. He worked quietly, gently, as if kindness was just natural. One evening, as the sun set behind the glass towers, Kieran asked, "Mark, did you have a family on your world?" Mark nodded slowly. "I did. Lost them when Earth fell." "I'm sorry," Kieran said softly. "That's sad?" Mark smiled faintly. "It's okay, kid. Sometimes life gives you another chance to care for someone." From the hallway, Alyara heard those words. For a long moment, she stood still. The walls of her power, the image she built to survive in a ruthless world, cracked a little more. Later that night, she invited Mark to dinner with them. It was awkward at first. No alien billionaire had ever dined with a human janitor. But when Kieran started telling jokes and Mark laughed with his usual unfiltered joy, even Alyara found herself smiling. She didn't realize how long it had been since she last smiled. When the meal ended, she dismissed the servants and said softly, "Mark, thank you. My son, he's alive again." Mark looked down modestly. "I didn't do much, ma'am." You did more than anyone else ever could, she said quietly. As Mark left the room, Alyara stood by the window, watching the night lights of the city stretch beyond the horizon. She had built her empire on logic, wealth, and control, but this human's kindness was something her money could never buy. And deep inside, she began to wonder. Maybe it wasn't her who had hired him. Maybe fate had brought him to her door for a reason she was yet to understand. Dinner at the Venn Tower was usually silent. The table stretched for 10 meters. The plates were silver and the air was cold with quiet formality. But tonight, laughter filled the hall. Soft, warm laughter that came from one small voice. Kieran sat at the head of the table, his hover chair lifted slightly so he could reach his plate. Mark sat beside him, helping him cut a piece of roasted fruit. Alyara watched them from across the table, her eyes calm but her mind spinning. The alien servants exchanged uneasy glances. A human eating at the same table as their employer? It had never happened before. Yet Alyara didn't stop it. Something about the scene, the simple joy on her son's face, made her forget every unspoken rule of her world. Mark taught me how to use my arms better, Kieran said proudly. He says it's all about balance. That's right, Mark said with a grin, and not being afraid to fall once or twice. Alyara rested her chin on her hand, studying the human. Do you always talk to children like this? Mark looked up, surprised by the question. Like what, ma'am? Like they matter, she said quietly. Mark blinked. Of course they matter. The silence that followed felt heavy but not uncomfortable. It was as if Alyara was trying to remember something she'd forgotten long ago. As the meal went on, Kieran told more stories about how Mark showed him how to draw stars on paper instead of screens, and how they built a small wind toy that spun when air currents changed. Alyara listened without interrupting. After dinner, she dismissed the servants. The room felt softer without them. The lights dimmed, showing the glow of the city outside the tall glass walls. Mark was helping Kieran finish his dessert when Alyara suddenly said, Mark, sit. Have some tea. He hesitated. Ma'am, that's an order, she said, though her voice had a small smile. Mark obeyed, taking a seat across from her. Steam rose from the cup as he held it carefully. Never had alien tea before, he admitted. Smells like mint and firewood. It's made from the leaves of the lyra tree, Alyara said. It grows only on our homeworld. It's supposed to calm the mind. Mark took a sip and nodded. Then you must drink this a lot. Alyara laughed quietly, a sound that startled even herself. Not enough, I suppose, Kieran yawned. Alyara stood, brushing her son's head gently. Go rest, little one. Can Mark read me a story first? Alyara hesitated, then she nodded. Just one. Mark followed the boy to his room, reading an old Earth tale about a brave sailor who found stars in a bottle. Kieran fell asleep halfway through, smiling. Mark covered him with a blanket and whispered, Good night, little hero. When he stepped out, Alyara was waiting in the hallway. Her expression was unreadable. He hasn't slept peacefully like that in years, she said softly. Mark smiled. He's a strong kid. He just needed someone to remind him. Alyara looked at him for a long time. You remind me of someone I used to know, she said quietly. Before all of this, someone close? She turned away, her voice almost a whisper. Someone who believed kindness was strength, not weakness. For a few seconds, neither spoke. The only sound was the soft hum of the city beyond the windows. Finally, Alyara asked, Do humans always help others so easily? Mark thought for a moment. Not always. But when we do, we mean it. Alyara's eyes softened. Your kind has suffered. Yet you still give. He shrugged lightly. Because if we stop caring, we stop being human. Something inside Alyara cracked. She had spent her life surrounded by power, by people who only spoke in numbers and profits. This human, with his simple words, made her feel something she had buried long ago. Hope. Later that night, when Mark had gone to his quarters, Alyara sat alone by the glass wall, watching the ships fly across the stars. She poured herself another cup of tea but didn't drink it. Her reflection stared back, a queen of metal and wealth but not of heart. For the first time in decades, she felt small. Meanwhile, far below in the workers' quarters, Mark looked out the narrow window, seeing the same stars from a much lower place. He didn't know that the most powerful woman on the planet was thinking about him at that very moment. But not everyone in that tower approved. Behind closed doors, some of Alyara's advisors whispered, The human is too close, one said. If the media finds out, it will destroy her reputation. Another added, he could be manipulating her. Humans always want more. The rumor spread quietly through the elite levels of Virella Prime, twisting the story into scandal. And by the next sunrise, someone in the council had already begun to prepare a report, one that could destroy the human's life and Alyara's name together. But Alyara didn't know that yet. She only knew that for one rare evening, her home had felt like a real family, and she wasn't ready to let that feeling go. The morning sky over Virella Prime burned gold, but inside the tower of Alyara Ven, the air felt cold. A storm was brewing, not outside, but in the halls of power. For weeks, whispers had spread through the elite circles. A billionaire letting a human janitor live in her mansion? Dine at her table? Play with her heir? To them, it was scandal, a humiliation for their kind. In the polished conference chamber of Ventec, 12 alien council members sat in a semicircle, eyes sharp as knives. Alyara stood before them, calm but firm, while the room buzzed with tension. Madame Ven, one elder said, his scales glinting under the lights. The council has received disturbing reports. A human laborer working directly with your child? Sharing meals with you? Do you understand how this looks? Alyara's expression didn't change. I understand exactly how it looks, she replied. It looks like compassion. Compassion? Another sneered. For them? They are a labor species, not equals. Your behavior damages our prestige, her voice turned cold. Prestige means nothing to a mother who nearly lost her child. Murmurs rippled across the table. One advisor rose, slamming a tablet down. Enough sentiment. This human is a threat. He could be a spy. You've endangered your son, your company, and our reputation. Alyara leaned forward, her violet eyes narrowing. His name is Mark, and the only thing he's guilty of is being kind. Before the argument could continue, the doors hissed open. Virel, her assistant, rushed in pale-faced. Madam, Security Division has issued an order. The human has been detained. The room fell silent. What? Alyara's voice echoed through the hall. They claim he violated security zones and tampered with medical equipment, Virel said nervously. He's being held at the lower sector detention bay. Alyara's hands curled into fists. Who approved this? The council, the elder said smugly. You left us no choice. You've allowed a human into private areas. It is against every code. We acted to protect you. Protect me? She said sharply. From what? A man who helped my child walk again? But the council didn't listen. To them, she had already crossed a line. In the lower city, Mark didn't resist when the drones surrounded him. He didn't fight as metal cuffs locked around his wrists. He only looked confused. What's this about? He asked the officer. Violation of alien protection laws, the officer said flatly. You're under arrest for unauthorized contact with a protected heir. Mark sighed softly. Figures. I fix a chair and now I'm a criminal. As they took him through the gray corridors, whispers followed. That's the human from the tower, one guard muttered. I heard the lady trusted him. Not for long, another laughed. Mark kept his head down. He wasn't angry, just tired. He thought about Kieran's smile, about Alyara's quiet laughter at dinner. Maybe it had all been too good to last. At the tower, Kieran was screaming. His small body trembled, tears streaming down his cheeks. Where's Mark? He shouted. Where did they take him? Alyara rushed into his room, kneeling beside him. Kieran, listen to me. They took him away. He didn't do anything wrong. The boy cried, clutching her sleeve. His hoverchair trembled as his control rings flickered red. Alyara wrapped her arms around him. I know, my son. I know. But deep down, she felt the weight of her own silence. She had tried to play both worlds, the heart of a mother and the face of an empire, and now it had shattered. Hours later, she stood on her balcony as storm clouds gathered over the city. Wind whipped her hair as lightning lit up the sky. Below, the city lights blinked like nervous eyes watching her fall from grace. Virel approached quietly. Madam, the council is advising you to distance yourself from the human. They say this can all go away if you let him be deported. Alyara didn't turn. And if I don't? Virel hesitated. You'll lose everything. The board, the contracts, your seat on the trade council. They'll strip you of power. Alyara looked out at the endless skyline. Power means nothing if I have to live without my conscience. Virel stepped back, realizing her tone left no room for argument. That night, Kieran refused to eat. He sat in silence, staring at the small toy car Mark had helped him build. It no longer moved. Alyara sat beside him. "He will come back," she whispered, though her voice trembled. Kieran looked up with wide, teary eyes. "Promise?" Alyara nodded, though inside she felt the burn of guilt. "Promise." After he fell asleep, she stood by his bedside, watching the soft rhythm of his breathing. Then she turned and walked out of the room, her expression turning to steel. She wasn't a ruler anymore. She wasn't a business tycoon. Tonight she was a mother and a human's friend, and by dawn, she would become something even greater. She whispered into the quiet hallway, "No one takes away my son's happiness." Then she called her transport. "Prepare the car," she told the AI. "We're going to the detention bay." Outside, thunder rolled across the alien sky like the growl of justice itself, and somewhere in the darkness below, a lonely human janitor sat in his cold cell, unaware that the most powerful woman on the planet was about to start a war for him. The detention bay was buried beneath the shining towers of Virella Prime, a dark place where light rarely reached. The walls were gray, the air smelled of metal and despair, and security drones hovered silently in the corners. Inside one of the cells sat Mark, hands cuffed, staring at the flickering ceiling light. He didn't know how long he'd been there. Time in a cell always felt slower. He had done nothing wrong, yet he knew the truth. Kindness often made enemies among those who feared it. He thought of Kieran's laugh, of Alyara's quiet smile, and the simple dinners that had felt almost like family. He hoped they were safe even if he never saw them again. Then footsteps echoed down the corridor. They were sharp, deliberate, confident. Two guards turned suddenly, eyes widening. "Madame Venn," one stammered. Alyara stepped out of the shadows, her golden cloak brushing the floor, her eyes fierce as a storm. "Open this cell," she ordered. "Ma'am, we can't. The council—" She cut him off. "The council doesn't own me." Her voice hit like thunder. The guards hesitated, but when she raised her wrist console, the security locks disengaged. The cell door hissed open. Mark looked up in shock. "Alyara? You're coming with me," she said simply. He stood slowly, rubbing his wrists. "You shouldn't be here. They'll destroy your career." Alyara gave a faint smile. "They already tried. Now I'll destroy their rules." Before the guards could stop her, she turned to them. "Tell your council this arrest was unlawful. If you resist, every drone in this building will be offline in 30 seconds. The guards froze as her wrist console blinked red. Her company had built half the city's systems, and she had access codes no one could block. Mark followed her through the metallic halls as alarms began to echo above. "You didn't have to do this," he said softly. "Yes, I did," she replied. "You showed my son kindness when the whole world showed him pity. You reminded me what it means to be alive." They burst into the open night. The sky above Virella was thick with rain and flashing lightning. Her transport waited on the platform, sleek and black. They climbed aboard, the engines roaring as it lifted into the storm. As they flew over the glowing city, Mark glanced at her. "They'll call this madness. I call it justice," she said. "You saved my child. Now it's my turn to save you." By dawn, the city buzzed with chaos. Newsfeeds across the system flashed headlines. Alyara Venn defies council to freeze human worker. Ventech Empire in rebellion. The elite were furious. Some demanded her arrest, others her exile. But the public, especially the lower workers and humans scattered across the colonies, whispered her name with awe. Inside her tower, Alyara stood before a massive screen, facing a live hearing broadcast to the entire planet. Her advisors begged her to back down. Virella paced behind her, pale with fear. "Madam, please. If you challenge the council, they'll strip your citizenship, your assets, everything." Alyara's gaze stayed fixed on the camera. "Let them strip everything," she said. "But they will not strip away our humanity." The court feed activated. Dozens of alien faces filled the screen, powerful figures from every corporate sector. One counselor snarled, "Alyara Venn, you have violated our laws. You aided a human worker against the will of this council. Do you admit this?" "I do," she said calmly. "Then you accept the punishment?" "No," she said, voice rising like thunder. "I reject the law itself." Gasps echoed across the broadcast. "You speak treason," another hissed. "I speak truth," she replied. This law was made to divide, to keep humans beneath us. But I have seen what a single human heart can do. That man saved my son. Not because he was paid, not because he wanted power, but because he cared. She turned her eyes directly to the camera. If that is a crime, then I stand guilty with pride. The entire planet watched in silence. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then the council cut the feed, but it was too late. The message had already spread to every corner of Virella Prime. Later that day, Alyara stood with Mark and Kieran on her balcony as the storm clouds finally broke apart. The sun cut through, warm and golden. Mark shook his head. You didn't have to risk everything for me. Alyara smiled gently. You risked everything the moment you helped my child. I only returned the favor. Kieran rolled closer, clutching Mark's sleeve. You're not going away again, right? Mark knelt beside him. Not unless your mom fires me. Alyara laughed softly, a real, unguarded laugh. You're impossible to fire, human. They stood there together as sunlight spilled over the city. But below in the streets, something had begun to stir. Humans and aliens alike were talking, and about compassion, equality, and the courage of one woman who broke the rules for what was right. Alyara looked out over her empire and whispered, This isn't the end, it's the beginning. And beside her, Mark simply nodded. That's the thing about kindness, it spreads faster than fear. The storm had passed, but the world had changed forever. The sun rose over Virella Prime with a strange calm that morning. For the first time in years, the golden towers glowed not with arrogance but with change. The storm had passed, but the ripples it left were spreading through every street, every screen, every heart across the city. People whispered the same name, Alyara Ven, the alien billionaire who defied the High Council, broke the ancient caste rules and stood beside a human janitor before the whole world. Some called her reckless. Some called her mad, but many called her brave. Mark stood quietly on the balcony of the Ven Tower, watching the sunrise reflect off the glass spires. The air felt cleaner somehow, lighter. He still wore his same gray uniform, though it was no longer a mark of servitude. He didn't belong to anyone anymore. Behind him, Kieran rolled his hover chair toward the balcony door, smiling brighter than ever. His mechanical legs moved better now, stronger, thanks to endless therapy and his own courage. You're up early, buddy, Mark said, turning with a grin. Kieran nodded. Mom said today's a big day. We're going to the Central Plaza. That's right, Mark said softly. She's making it official. Alyara entered a moment later, dressed not in her royal silks but in simple white fabric, her hair tied back. She looked peaceful yet determined. You ready? She asked them both. Mark nodded. Always. The plaza outside Ventec headquarters was overflowing. Thousands of beings, alien and human alike, stood shoulder to shoulder waiting. News drones floated above, streaming the moment live to every colony and world in the system. When Alyara stepped onto the platform, silence fell. Even the air seemed to hold its breath. She looked out over the crowd and began to speak, her voice steady and clear. For generations, she said, we built walls between our kinds. We called it order. We called it law. But those walls were never meant to protect us, they were meant to divide us. Her gaze swept across the crowd, stopping briefly on the group of humans standing near the back. Their clothes were plain, their faces wary, uncertain. But one man, she continued, pointing gently toward Mark, reminded me what we lost when we built those walls. He showed my child kindness when no one else would. He reminded me that compassion needs no species, no rank, no permission. Mark shifted awkwardly as thousands of eyes turned toward him. He never liked attention. He would rather have stayed in the shadows with his mop and bucket. But now even he could feel something powerful rising around him, something far bigger than himself. Alyara lifted a small data crystal above her head. Today, by the authority once given to me by this empire and now returned to its people, I dissolve the anti-human labor code. From this moment, humans are free citizens of Virella Prime. The crowd gasped. Then came the sound, soft at first, then louder. Cheers, cries, applause that grew like a tidal wave. Humans in the back wept openly. Some fell to their knees, others hugged strangers. Even a few aliens joined in, their old fear breaking apart under the weight of something new. Hope. Kieran clapped his small hands, tears shining in his bright eyes. Mom did it, he whispered. Mark smiled quietly beside him. No, you did, kid. You gave her a reason. Alyara finished her speech with words that would echo for generations. Let this be the day we remember that kindness, not power, is what holds civilizations together. When she stepped down from the stage, Mark and Kieran were waiting for her. She looked tired, but there was peace in her eyes, the kind that comes only after choosing what's right no matter the cost. You changed everything, Mark said softly. Alyara shook her head. No, you changed everything, Mark. I only followed. He laughed faintly. Didn't think mopping floors would lead to a revolution. She smiled. Sometimes revolutions start with small acts, like cleaning up what others ignore. Kieran rolled between them and held both their hands. Can we go home now? Alyara knelt beside him, brushing his hair. Yes, my son, home. Later that evening, the three of them sat together in the quiet garden atop the Venn Tower. The city glowed beneath them, not as a symbol of greed, but of something reborn. Mark watched the stars overhead, remembering Earth, remembering all that was lost. But tonight he didn't feel so far from home. Alyara sipped her tea, the same kind she had once shared awkwardly at that long, silent dinner. I've been thinking, she said softly. I want to create something new, a foundation, one that helps humans and aliens learn from each other. Mark raised an eyebrow. You're serious? Completely, she said. And I want you to help me lead it, he blinked, stunned. I'm just a janitor. Not anymore, she said gently. You're proof that humanity's greatest strength isn't its machines, it's its heart. For a long moment, they sat in silence, watching the stars shimmer like promises. Kieran yawned, leaning against Mark's arm. Hey, Mark? Yeah, kid. I'm glad you didn't walk away that night. Mark smiled faintly. Me too, little man. Above them, the twin moons of Virella rose side by side, shining like two guardians watching over a world finally learning to heal. And somewhere in the endless expanse of the stars, the human spirit shone quietly, unchanged, unbroken, and unstoppable, because one man had chosen to help, one mother had chosen to believe, and one child had chosen to love, and together, they had rewritten the future of an entire world.